This is Living Power with Dan Hurst.
The easiest thing in the world, okay, settle down. The easiest thing in the world is to blame someone else. When I was working in radio, something had happened. It was a programming issue of some sort. I don't remember exactly what it was. But I remember that we needed to come to some sort of consensus of how we were going to handle it. And I was talking to my supervisor, and I said, what are we going to do? And his exact words were, don't worry about it, we'll find somebody to blame. And that's kind of the corporate way. You know, it's real easy to find somebody to blame and to cast responsibility on. Not that other people don't do things that aren't blameworthy, because they do. And, I was thinking as I was preparing this lesson, if I had a nickel for everything that Marcia has to blame me for, I would be a wealthy man. But it's not that people don't do blameworthy things. They do. But interestingly, in the Bible, the word that's used for blame is the same word that is used for finding a fault. Not finding fault, finding a fault. In other words, when we blame someone for something, what we're saying is, the biblical concept is, the biblical word is, we're also saying that they have a fault, or that they are flawed. In other words, at fault because of a fault. That's really the biblical concept of blame. That somebody is at fault because they have a fault in their life. He did that because he's insensitive. He's at fault because of the fault in his life. He's insensitive, or he's disrespectful, or he's vindictive. Those things are faults, and so he's at fault for something that he did because of the fault in his life. Now, when we blame God for something, we do the same thing. It happened in the story of Lazarus. Jesus was blamed for not healing Lazarus. In essence, he was placed at fault. He was considered to have a flaw. And we'll see this as we go through this particular passage. We'll see that people blamed Jesus for Lazarus' death. And in doing that, they considered him to have they were basically saying, you have a flaw, or you have a fault, and so you are at fault. Now, when we do this study today, there are going to be things that I say that you're not going to agree with. And I'm okay with that. You know, in a class this size, and because we're Baptist, we're not going to agree on much of anything. And so there are going to be things that I say that you disagree with, but let me ask you to take it and consider it and let it just simmer in your life for a while. And listen to it. Take notes and consider it. Use the Scriptures and find out what this says and how you can take this and apply it in your life. Let it settle before you completely reject it. This is not an easy lesson to teach, because it's not an area that we teach very often, frankly. And so it can be very, very difficult. But I want you to take what happened here and apply it in your own life and see if these principles don't work, if these truths aren't real in your own life. Let's take a look at the passage. It's in John chapter 11, starting with verse 17. It's in your study guides there if you want to follow along. Now, when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, remember, Jesus had been across the Jordan. He'd been over there with his disciples, and he got word that Lazarus was sick. Actually, Lazarus had already died at that point. And so, instead of coming right to Mary and Martha's, who lived in Bethany, which is just outside of Jerusalem, it would have been about a 20-mile journey. So basically about a day's journey. Instead of going right to Bethany, Jesus decided to wait 2 days. And then when he decided to go to Jerusalem, the disciples are going, why do you want to do that? You know, they're trying to kill you there. Last time we were there, they tried to stone you to death. And so the disciples didn't really want to go either, because they knew that they were probably going to get wiped out. In fact, Thomas said, as we saw, the last verse that we saw last Sunday was, well, let's go with him so that we might die with him. It was kind of like, okay, we're all going to be killed if we go. So in that kind of environment, Jesus shows up in Bethany. Lazarus has been dead now for 4 days. And so many of the Jews had come, verse 19, many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them for their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary stayed seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." But Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "Oh, I know that he'll rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." Do you believe this? She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you're the Christ, the Son of God, who's coming into the world." When she said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, "The teacher is here and he's calling for you." And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" And they said, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. The shortest verse in the Bible. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying?" Blame. Now, I want us to take a look at something that happens in this passage. There are 3 ways that we blame God for things. Now, there may be others, but there are 3 ways in this passage that are mentioned that we hold God responsible and we blame him for things in our lives. These things are true not only for God, but they're also true for the way we treat other people. As you're going to see, we tend to blame people for things that happen, and we hold them responsible or we hold them accountable. Not that we shouldn't hold some people accountable. We should. We have that responsibility. You know, we have the responsibility as brothers and sisters in Christ to hold each other accountable. That's different from blaming people. Remember, blame is finding fault because of a fault. In other words, blaming something on somebody because of a fault in their life or a perceived fault. We consider this to be a fault in their life or a flaw in their life.
On behalf of Dan Hurst and the Open Class, we want to thank you for watching. We hope it was a blessing.